From Living Wisely, Living Well by Swami Kriyananda ji, August 26th. Another way to handle pain and sorrow is to tell yourself, what is happening now is only flotsam on the river of time. What you feel now won't last. Dwell on the thought of eternal bliss, which will be yours once you attain inner freedom. This saying is brief and is packed with meaning and teaching. What is happening now is only flotsam on the river of time. What you feel now won't last. I think you probably know, but flotsam is like a little piece of wood or a little leaf or just little things, little debris basically that just float on the river, and the idea is they float past. They just go on. These one thing to remember about emotions is that they are in motion, meaning they have come to us like a river flow, and it feels so immediate when it's happening, and then they will move on. And in this case, Swamiji's talking about handling pain and sorrow. And so, whereas we could talk about all emotions, this is specifically about feeling hurt, feeling harmful emotions, and so on. But again, when we're feeling pain and sorrow, that's even different than anger and jealousy and other kinds of negative emotions. Again, when we feel just wounded, when we feel hurt, when we feel mournful, to know that this won't last. And this can be a very helpful thought in many ways. Having said that, it's funny, it reminds me of Swamiji telling the story of once when it was unhelpful, when he was speaking to a brother disciple of his who was going through a period of moods and depression. And Swamiji said that when the man would come into his room and sit down on his bed and talk to him in this really heavy way, after the man left, there was this sort of cloud of despair left behind him in the room, and Swamiji said he had to chant and do other things to sort of clear out that vibration. He had great compassion for the man. He was a friend of his. But once he tried to cheer up this man by saying, listen, Norm, it will only last at most, maybe 40 or 50 more years. Meaning even just the rest of your life, but still it'll finally end, if only with death, and then it'll be over. And he said, whereas Swamiji was brightened, his mood was brightened by such a thought, he said this man's mood was brought even down worse, and it sent him into a tailspin for days of thinking it of lasting forever. And that's the trap of emotions, that when they're happening, they seem like they will be happening forever. When we're unhappy, it's hard to remember when we were ever happy. Now, if we are excited and delirious with joy, then yes, it is hard to remember if we were ever sad. We can just sort of say, I don't know if I could ever be sad again, as long as this, because of the joy I feel in this moment. And that's not true, because then often, right, even in the next moment, we can come crashing down. We get some new wonderful thing, we take it out of the box, we're so happy it finally came despite COVID, we unpack it and there's a scratch across. So we get on the phone with Amazon and say, how dare you? You see, it's just up and down. I'm not speaking from personal experience. Usually I am. This is not one that I've had yet. Maybe it's happening tomorrow, but anyway, I've certainly behaved in that way in the past and again tempted to even now, but I'm trying to learn here. So it's just not worth going up and down. But if instead of feeling sorrow, we feel great inward joy, instead of feeling emotional outward joy, we feel an inward joy, it isn't that we can't remember feeling sorrowful. We can remember. But we hope that even if I feel sorrowful again, or to be truthful, when I feel sorrowful again, because this world is a world of change, of opposites, of Maya, it always will go up and down. We do not always have to go up and down with it. That's another thing about, we don't want to be the flotsam on the river, bobbing on the waves, always being carried by the tides of fate to who knows where. Instead, we are supposed to watch the flotsam and say, bye-bye, bye-bye, I am here only with God. There's a beautiful song that was actually a popular song in America. Master rewrote the words. It's sitting in the silence on the sunny banks of my mind, like the river bank, but in this case, on the sunny banks of my mind, sitting in the silence with my guru by my side. Isn't that such a beautiful line that Master would write, sitting with my guru by my side? Because what a beautiful thought to think of us being able to be by his side, and that's what we're saying when we sing it. But he's also saying, I'm sitting with my guru by my side. And there's a recording of Swamiji singing this song, and you can feel Swamiji singing it with Master by his side, and we too singing it with Master by our side, with Swamiji by our side. So when my thoughts are laid to rest, when my thoughts when my thoughts have gone to rest, laid to rest seemed a little bit morbid, just when my thoughts have gone to rest, that's the time I see him best. Oh, 'tis lovely sitting in the silence. I just have to check. We've got a lot of different little irons in the fire at this moment. Please forgive me. And so I just had to check in on the status of one of them. And so it is now baked. The thought then is to, again, not to be the flotsam, but to be not the river, but to be perhaps the rock in the river, if you want to think of it that way. Or if you say, I can't help it being tossed up and down by all of this, then think of ourselves as that flotsam heading to the ocean. We are on the journey to the infinite ocean of God. We are going to get there. All rivers ultimately end, assuming, there's not some strange thing, in the ocean. All rivers end in the ocean. They lead to the ocean. And there's a beautiful song of Swamiji's called Channels, and he mentions about the spiritual thing we can learn from rivers. Rivers seek passage, unhindered by rock or tree. So may our lives flow steadfastly toward the sea. And no matter what, we are marching on toward God. And so that image sort of works here because we all will end up in God. There's no choice in the matter. Perhaps that can be explained at another time, why that should be so. But it is so. But we want to get there more quickly. We don't want to just sit passively, just bobbing up and down, waiting to get there. In fact, even though we will definitely get there, it is by our own effort also that we get there. So even though it will not take forever, it can take an unlimited amount of time. And so if you can puzzle over that one, and if you like to think logically and mathematically about it, but it is a valid statement. So, dwell on the thought of eternal bliss. You see, these moods, these painful feelings, these sorrows are fleeting, but that bliss is eternal. It is not fleeting. Sometimes people get upset that, I don't want to feel pain, or if I do feel it, I want to feel it briefly. But happiness, or pleasure, I want to feel for a long time. So I know the pendulum has to swing both ways, but can it go negative and then positive for a really long time, and then go negative and then positive? It doesn't work that way. And so but there's this sort of feeling, isn't there anything better? Yes, there is, bliss. And so to really that bliss is what you get a taste of through pleasure, through whether it's pleasure of the senses, through emotional satisfaction and so on. All of those are tastes of bliss. And you can even think of that moment of that first bite of whatever it is, or that first reunion with the friend, or whatever. That first moment, think of that moment as lasting forever. That's an idea of what bliss could be. It can't happen through sensory pleasures because our senses are limited. Our energy is going out of those senses in order to enjoy the thing. If we don't pour energy into that experience or that sense stimulation, we won't enjoy it. For example, someone gives us this wonderful sweet, but we're ill. We have a fever and we have a stomach ache, and someone says, "Oh, please, here, have a triple banana split sundae shake with whipped cream and whatever," and we just go, I can barely eat crackers and hold them down. Get away from me with that thing. Because we can feel that same thing will give us pain, which would normally give us this joy. Suppose we meet a friend and we're so happy to have that reunion, but we've just suffered perhaps the loss of a family member or some tragedy. And then even though the friend is there, and even though we feel, that we want to enjoy this moment of reunion, we can only sort of sigh and smile weakly because we've got this other feeling overwhelming us, you see? So it's not dependent on that thing. We have to have the energy free to give to that thing in order to enjoy it. A friend of mine would tell the story that when she had really wanted a new carpet for her place, and she finally got the new carpet and she loved it. And I think it was on maybe day 2 or day 3 that she realized that the carpet did not love her. The carpet could have cared less. And so she began to think, now wait a minute, what's going on with me really pouring all my love into an object that can't love me back. So, we want this bliss, this joy to last forever, and bliss is eternal. It does last forever. How do we get it? You see, it's all here. This isn't just poetry, or it isn't merely poetry. Swamiji says, "Dwell on the thought of eternal bliss, which will be yours once you attain inner freedom." And so the path, the sadhana, the technique is laid out before us. We have to strive for inner freedom. And if you don't know what it means to be inwardly free, just think about the opposite of what happens when you feel bound, trapped, pulled by habits, pulled by desire against your will, feeling sort of suffocated by fears, suffocated by other people's will for you or their behavior, feeling trapped. All of these things are the opposite of inner freedom, and they're a perfect place to start. They're holding up before us clues, signposts, doorways for us to say, okay, let me work on this feeling. Why do I feel afraid? Why do I not like it when people treat me this way? I remember Swamiji had made the statement, which is also made in the Gita, that all anger comes from blocked desire. Whenever our desire is blocked, we get angry, and that's what causes anger. We don't get what we wanted, or we do get what we hoped we wouldn't get, we were trying to avoid. And I remember there was a time when I was feeling angry about something, and I remembered that, well, I'm supposedly feeling angry because I have a desire. And I said, I don't have any desires. This has nothing to do with desire. I'm angry, and it's not because of desire. Krishna, I have a loophole. I found an exception to the Gita. Not likely, but still, this was my course of thinking. And so I said to myself, well, what am I angry about? I'm angry that they treated me in such and such a way. And well, does that mean you desire something about their behavior? No, this is just basic common decency. This is sort of zero I'm desiring. It can't be a desire. It's just, act normal. And then I realized I'm desire that they treat me better. That's a desire, isn't it? And then I remembered Swamiji's advice, his encouragement. Never accept the thought that you deserve better treatment from anyone. And at first, the ego says, now, wait a minute. I mean, especially if you think of all the things that I do, and they could at least... It just goes on. But the fact is, we're feeling like this, and the other person is sleeping peacefully. Or playing some Candy Crush on their iPhone or whatever, and has no awareness of this whole thing that we're going through, or this plot that we're forming about our revenge and all these things. They are peaceful, and we are miserable. It doesn't make what they did right, but let God worry about that. God is a better policeman than any of us, and He always sees that people have their sort of just desserts. They get to experience the consequence of their actions. Why? Because He's satisfied with punishing them, with punishing us? No, because He is trying to help them to learn. And we only learn if we go through the consequences of our actions. If we, as Master said, if you put your hand in the fire, God will not say, I love you. He will burn you. You see, it's such a wonderful thought. He said, God's laws are pretty hard if you break them. So, if you put your hand in the fire, God will not say, I love you. He will burn you. But He said, but God doesn't want you to put your hand in the fire. He has given you the freedom to put your hand anywhere you want. Why do you try the fire? You see? So it isn't His law that we suffer, but He won't even go against His own rules. Why? Because this is what He's decided for this universe and we'd better play along? No, because these are the rules of our own nature. It is the way we are built. When we are generous, when we are kind, when we are patient, when we can endure even mistreatment by others, at least bear it, we end up feeling a greater joy inside. It's funny. It's a funny sort of contradiction that, it seems at first like, well, I really let them know how I feel. They'll think twice again before treating me like that, or calling me up, or spending any time with me at all, or wanting to even be around me again. You see, if you act like that, everybody runs. And so unless they're quarantined with you during lockdown, then other kinds of troubles happen. So instead of that, to just... You can express your feelings to God. I don't mean to suppress your feelings, to deny them. They're there. It's fine to say, look, this really hurt. If we're angry, it's often because we're hurt also. And if you can get to the hurt beneath the anger, then you've got something to work with, because you're closer to the actual cause, rather than just the symptom, the outward effect. That's like having some sort of illness that gives you also some swelling on your arm, and so you just put a little topical skin ointment on the arm, when really it's this other thing that needs to be cured. So don't worry about the anger, get to the hurt, and then in time see if you can also get beyond it. And sometimes we do that just by giving it to Divine Mother, saying it does hurt. You see? And that's it, and being okay with it hurting, but not necessarily taking it out on these people. Swamiji said, speaking of leadership, but it applies well to yogi as well to yogis. He said, a leader would do well to control his emotions, or at least conceal them. and I've often thought about that, not as a leader, but just as a person, that I don't know how well I can succeed in the first one, but I can try to pursue a success in the second one. At least conceal them. Because then you leave your options open. People say, oh, is that fine with you? And then go into the other room and you can unconceal them to the empty wall. Now, but when we do bear up bravely over an unreasonable situation, the feeling afterwards is one of peace, and even a strange sense of accomplishment. I didn't think I could do that, and I did. We sort of feel a little taller, and because we've again realized that we had great willpower. In this case, to restrain ourselves. Master said, if you can't develop willpower, develop won't power. And in this case, it would be, I won't react. I'm not going to react. I'm not going to, meaning outwardly. I may be having all kinds of reaction, but that can be hidden for now. Let me just not just add fire to the situation. Go where the situation, where the forces of argument are begging me to go. God doesn't love a fight, but Satan does. And so there will be that temptation, that push even. Oh, come on, just one swing. And so avoid that temptation if you want to feel happier. That's the only reason, not to follow the rules, not to be more spiritual, to get better marks from Babaji. Okay. No, to be happier. And you'll get better marks from Babaji too. But just to feel happier. So the way to find inner freedom is, one simple way is to look for the ways in which you don't have that freedom. Inwardly, ways in which you feel more like the flotsam, and start working on those. That's in one way you could say the whole purpose of the spiritual path. So God bless you.